Welcome to this afternoon session. So I thought it was just a really good opportunity to sort of hit while the iron is hot, effectively, and just think about gathering our communities together. And we talk a lot about skills and opportunities, and it just seemed a really appropriate thing to do since we've got excellent people in diverse careers in the audience throughout the past 2 days, to get them to share a little bit more about their journey, what they're up to share their experiences, to see if they inspire anybody in the audience to go in a non-academic direction. So can I ask the panel to join me up on stage? So we have Tim Ays from Imperagen, Joe Mowll-Clarke from the University of Manchester, Vicky Groof from Holiferm, and Kyle Struthers Burgess. You've double-barreled your name since I last saw you. So congratulations. Well, I know that was a while ago. Anyway, Kyle from the IP law firm. So you're nice and cozy on the stage. So would you like to just introduce yourselves? I know you've got, I think, a slide each to just tell us a little bit about the journeys and the experiences that you've had so far, and we'll just then open it out for Q&A. So please, as the speakers are going through their journey, think about the questions that you want to ask them. It is no such thing as a silly question, so it is a good open discussion, so please take advantage and get those questions lined up. I'm not sure who's first.
That looks like half of my slide, but it's got animation on it.
Perfect, okay. Yep. Yes, you can use the clicker. Just don't press it down too long, that's what happens.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Over to you.
Can everyone hear me okay then? Cool. So, hi everyone, I'm Joe. I'm currently the communications lead for the Manchester Cancer Research Centre. I'll explain all that in a minute. And probably about 10 years ago or so, I was on the other side of a panel like this, doing my PhD in theoretical chemistry, thinking, what on earth am I going to do after I graduate? Because that's the question that every single person will experience from their family members. If you haven't yet, for a PhD student, expect it soon when you're coming to the end of your PhD. So previously I did my maths in chemistry and then my PhD at the University of Sheffield. And one of the themes of probably mine and no doubt everyone else's kind of career pathways is I was very lucky, and there were lots of opportunities that were both available and I was able to identify and then go out and kind of secure. So while I was doing my PhD, luckily enough, the university was hiring for a kind of departmental publicist during PhD to kind of get an extra couple of months of funding and write some articles about, well, what the department was doing. So I did that for about a year, after which I then joined a life science marketing PR agency known as Notch in Manchester. And that I was doing loads of different articles for things like Chemistry World, different kind of sector press publications, writing about mass spectrometry and about like sort of the chemicals industry, which was really quite interesting and different. And eventually rose to the ranks to become content manager, where I was kind of managing the delivery of all of their stuff. And then moved to Manchester Cancer Research Centre, which is a partnership between University of Manchester, Cancer Research UK, and the Christie, which is an NHS trust, doing a whole host of different things. So I manage or lead now everything from kind of like website content, blogs, marketing plans, and all this kind of stuff, and student recruitment. What I will say, no 2 days are the same, and no doubt we'll come into this in all the questions, but it's very, very diverse to go into kind of science writing and science communications. I'll hand over to Vicky in a second. I just put some kind of final pointers up here, just in case I don't cover them. But if anyone is looking to kind of break into science communication, jobs.ac.uk is the best place to find academic positions in kind of professional services. Network and build connections elsewhere, and look towards all your secondary skills as kind of PhD students / researchers. There's always a lot of stuff that you can that you do on a daily basis that you should kind of take advantage of, and no doubt most other people will probably mention all this stuff throughout their talks as well. So I'll hand over to Vicky. That's okay.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, I don't have any animations in my slide. I feel like I missed the opportunity there to jazz it up. I've actually just provided a very condensed version of my CV. Not very interesting slide in itself, just a bit of a summary there. But in short, I'm currently Principal Innovation Engineer at Holiferm. I joined the company 4.5 years ago now. It's insane how fast time flies. And I joined it basically straight out of my PhD, and it was my first job in industry. Prior to that, I did my bachelor's and master's in bioscience engineering. Wanted to move abroad, so I'm originally from Belgium, and I was like, I want to go somewhere else. PhD is a great opportunity to just go somewhere else for a temporary amount of time. It was only going to be 4 years. Well, I fell in love with an Englishman, and so I'm still stuck in the UK. And during my PhD thesis write-up, I was indeed at that point where, what am I going to do after? My partner, he was working at Manchester in that area, so I knew I wanted to move up to the northwest. I was also writing up my PhD during a lockdown, so there was really not much to do. Going slightly insane, like I feel really sorry for all of you last year PhD students at the moment who are going through that process of write-up. It's tough, you'll get through it, it finishes. And I was kind of like, okay, I need to find something in the Northwest. And I struggle a bit with, I knew I didn't want to stay in academia because the whole postdoc experience of having a position for 2 years here, 3 years there, if you're lucky, I was like, that kind of seems like a bit stressful. I want to make more of a change, something more impactful in industry. I thought big business, big industry doesn't feel quite right for me either. I'd like some more flexibility. I want to create something. And actually what really drew to me was startup businesses, and the whole idea of a startup seemed really interesting. But in all honesty, I didn't have any ideas of my own, really, to start a business. And so then Holiferm actually ticked all the bases because at the time it was roughly, well, I was employee number 10 when I joined the company, but it just spun out from the University of Manchester. They were looking for fermentation and downstream process engineers to strengthen their team. So it was in my field, it was in the right location, it was a type of company that I thought, that could interest me. And I think the most important thing that drew me to it was that during the interview to the company, I actually really, really enjoyed my technical interview. I know that sounds a bit odd because usually it's a very stressful moment where you feel like you're being quizzed. But again, it was a lockdown, so I was bored. I was writing my thesis, so double bored. And just giving the opportunity to think through technical problems that weren't related to my thesis, I thought was really, really fun. And so the interview process itself, with the founders of the company, like James Winterburn from the University of Manchester, and then with Ben, it was just an incredibly fun experience that I was like, yeah, okay, that's a company I want to work for, I'm going there. Joined, as I said, as fermentation downstream processing engineer, and was only in that position for 7 to 8 months until they asked me to become chief technology officer, so to join the senior leadership team. And I thought, well, it'd be silly to not say yes to this. It's such a great opportunity. But I'd never done formal management before. It was also my first job in industry, so I learned a lot in a very short time. And after 2.5 years of being in that senior leadership position, I recognized that there was one thing that I really, really missed, and that was that fun element in terms of what initially excited me, the technology development, being in the lab, making things myself. I really started missing, and I recognized I'm doing a lot of management, and I just needed to go back to that technical development. So actually since last year, I've changed my role to principal innovation engineer. So I'm back in the lab, I'm back developing technologies. I'm also doing a lot of project lead. I'm currently the technical lead of one of our major projects in the company. So while I'm still overseeing multiple business units and overseeing big pieces of work and still doing some strategic thinking, I can also carve out some time for proof of concepts, developing prototypes, the stuff I really enjoy. And I've added here as well on this slide some fun little extras that kind of, as was said earlier, don't underestimate the value that you've done during your PhD or you will continue to do in doing things on the side. For instance, doing science outreach joining entrepreneurial competitions, stuff like that, that initially I just did because it was kind of fun, actually gave me a lot of skills, such as being comfortable to talk in front of a public or translating technical concepts for a non-technical audience. Those non-technical skills were essential, not just when I was CTO, but even now as a principal innovation engineer. Like, don't forget to include those elements when you think about the career you're trying to build and how much of transferable skills those fun extras, as I call them, are teaching you. And I guess I'll stop there to pass on. I can't quite read who's next.
I think it's mine.
There you go.
Yeah, no, thank you. So mine's a pretty straightforward story, to be honest. I'm definitely here not as like a success story of what you could be, but just as like a next step in your career. So I started off and did an EPSRC funded PhD, and that was sort of really enjoyable. And so much so that I just continued on. I did a postdoc, sort of moved sort of department, and so the project focus was quite different, but obviously just enjoying the wet lab experience. Everything about it was sort of quite fun. And then it sort of got to the point, and it's the same thing that resonated with me from Vicky's talk, was just like, in terms of the fear that academia might not necessarily reinvest back in yourself in terms of 2-year contracts, what's the guarantee of your next job? And so I sort of started looking outside of academia. And at the time, I had a friend who was also on the CDT, who was growing his startup company, and he put me in touch with his patent sort of lawyer. And I just sort of started having conversations with her, and she sort of told me about the role and what they do and stuff. But it's obviously quite competitive, so I just sort of speculatively applied, didn't expect to hear anything. Continued with my postdoc. I was looking at a senior scientist position after that, and then I just heard back from the company, started training. The last 3 years I've started sort of just still training, haven't qualified yet. It's quite a long process, and the reason I've put this slide together is not to sort of highlight maybe the extras that I did during PhD, postdoc, or now, but it's just sort of to show you the transition between, if you are interested in this career, is the fact that during my PhD and postdoc, a lot of my extra sort of responsibilities or jobs was sort of tutoring, teaching, and you become quite an expert in your field and you feel quite confident. And then obviously you sort of move into sort of the legal sector, and now it's all become a lot of personal study. So there is this huge learning curve, which is exciting, but at the same time it's sort of quite challenging. And also, I just sort of to address the sort of misconception maybe that a lot of people think an IP lawyer, you need a legal background, but actually that's not true. They want a STEM background, and then you just sort of learn the law sort of, alongside the day-to-day job. So sort of this is a potential job opportunity for everybody in this room. And I'd really sort of promote it. It's not quite as dull as you might think, and hopefully that will come across sort of when we talk. And if anybody is interested and wants to grab me sort of afterwards, I'm sort of happy to sort of give you a bit more sort of insight into the sort of job role. Yeah, happy to move on.
Okay, I don't have a slide, but maybe coming from a startup, that's not much of a surprise, given like often find myself having to do like improvise and do stuff on the spot. So I'll paint you a very brief picture, verbally instead. So I'm Tim Eyes. I'm Chief Product Officer and co-founder at Imperagen, along with Andy Curran, who's done a great job this morning explaining the technology of the company. But I'll paint you a little bit of a picture of like how we roughly got there. And again, I've got a few years on these guys as well, so maybe my kind of career path wouldn't fit on one slide probably. But very much background in molecular biology, biotechnology, engineering biology, whatever you want to call it, as most of you in the room. I did my undergraduate and a postgrad at Nottingham, did an MSc down there a long time ago now, 20 years ago, would you believe? And I was lucky during my career, at the beginning of my career at the university, that I did some of those early kind of entrepreneur schemes. It's still around, it's called Biotech Yes. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but that kind of gave me a bit of a taste of perhaps what you could do with biotech, even though I'd never even worked in the field. But after my master's, I was lucky to move back up north and join a spin-out from the University of Manchester in antibody therapeutics. And I'll maybe talk a bit about that later, but that was like the formative years for me as a bench scientist, working in an exciting, small, dynamic company. Really exciting period, especially in the antibody field. Really just loved that experience of working in a dynamic team, and it was all very successful. But again, I suppose a bit like Vicky, it got to a point where, just as a kind of the opposite, as a bench scientist, it did get I kind of hit a bit of a wall, and I was really conscious I wanted to go back and do a PhD and explore, molecular biology and immunology a bit more. So I ended up at the MIB doing a PhD, where I was afforded quite a bit of flexibility in what I studied. And that's where I actually met Andy Curran all those years ago. And then did a couple of postdocs, all with in mind protein engineering, sailing close to industrial applications for where my research was heading. I was always keen to thinking about how could I apply my research and my studies, always with perhaps in the back of my mind, having had that experience working in a startup, that maybe that's something I'd like to do at some point in the distant future. But never would have imagined back then I'd be here now talking about it, I have to say. So it's amazing to be able to do that. So fast forwarding to where we are now with Imperagen, I'm Chief Product Officer. So what does that look like? I wear many hats, as you will do in a startup, but chiefly I'm involved in business development. So on a typical day, I'll be perhaps following up with partners and customers, scoping out new projects for them, in terms of writing up the proposals and contracts, checking in on the lab team, making sure the projects are sort of running smoothly so I can communicate back to the customers, reviewing contracts, CDAs, planning conference attendance. I'm a director of the company as well, so I have quite a lot of responsibility in terms of the direction and strategy for the company. So it's super busy. And clearly I missed the memo about drawing up slides, but that's maybe excusable today. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I just feel I need to say a few things to support academia. So I have a few years on probably all of you, but just to say, I guess sort of my journey, I was a PhD student. I'm a polymer chemist by training. I did my undergraduate and PhD in different chemistry departments, Strathclyde and Durham. Then I went and did a fellowship down in Cambridge in the physics department. And this was where I think I learned one of my first lessons that still keep with me, and I share a lot with people. So when I went to Cambridge, I was a postdoc working with a great physicist, Aline Donald, down there. And I kind of went down there to Cambridge to kind of integrate into college life because it seemed sort of an enigma, and Cambridge was great. But as a postdoc, you're not in college, in one of the colleges, unless you become a junior research fellow or a fellow. So I prepared an application for joining a junior research fellow. And I said to my supervisor, I'm going to apply for all these different colleges to be a junior research fellow, partly so I get free accommodation, free meals, and I can integrate into the college life. And she said, don't bother, you're not Oxbridge, you won't get it. So I kind of sat back and I thought, well, I've written it, I might as well just submit it. So even when somebody tells you no, and you've got passion to do it, just do it. There's nothing, the worst thing that can happen, I could have got all rejection letters back and I'd have been in the same place as I was before I started. So I think that always sticks with me, that, if you don't try, you don't get, but if you try, you might get. So yeah, I think that's something that sticks with me. So when you're thinking about going for jobs and things like that, or opportunities that you feel are slightly out with your comfort zone or slightly out with reach, go for it, because you never know who's going to take a punt on you. You never know what they might see in you that you don't see in yourself, and they might say yes. And that's whether you're starting a company, going in a new direction, or going for opportunities, etc. So that was my little ditty. And then from Cambridge, I went and became a lecturer in chemical engineering. So when we were talking earlier about biotechnology, so it's very, very multidisciplinary, and hopefully sort of that background helps set the different types of opportunities that you can have. So I always think if it's an interdisciplinary area, yes, it can be a little bit confusing, but you've got so many more opportunities than somebody who's an organic synthetic chemist, dare I say. Or you can apply your chemistry to different fields. Okay, so first question to sort of the panel. You talked quite a bit about doing different things in your PhDs to help you develop skills and experiences that landed you the role that you're in now. What made you think, was that kind of all deliberate? Was it fortuitous? And what kind of things did you do? And what kind of advice have you got to everybody here to go try some different extracurricular or in-curricular things to broaden out the CV? Cal, you're looking like you're going first.
I'm happy to go, just because my attitude has always been a bit just sort of say yes. So just because my slide's up there, one of the things under the postdoc was University Research Ethics Council member, which is really like, I don't know if anybody's doing the postdoc at the University of Manchester, but this is available to sort of staff members if you apply. It's a really dry job in the sense that you just sort of review applications that are obviously wanting to do sort of studies with members of the public. You obviously just need to sort of sanity check it, make sure that it's compliant with sort of, ethical standards, or at least the ethical standards that the university want to uphold. And it sounds really dry, but it was that sort of job that was able to sort of help showcase like the level of meticulous detail that you need to sort of be a patent attorney. So I just sort of said yes because it was offered to me when I was doing my postdoc, because the previous member was in the same lab as me. And she decided to step down because she was actually moving on to be a lecturer. And so the position became available because she didn't feel like she had the same time to commit to it. And so I just said, I'll take it. Why not? And that sort of, I think, like, really helped showcase the sort of skills that are really important to train a patent attorney. And if I hadn't have done that, I think the interview process would have been a lot harder to try and evidence, like, sort of reading documents in detail and those sort of critical sort of skills that you need. So, and that was literally just saying yes because somebody else was stepping down. So I definitely think just say yes to everything, not necessarily with a view of what the next step is, but just sort of be open-minded.
Yeah, go on.
I'd fully agree with that. I think it's things like this, coming in, talking at a conference, presenting a poster. You just never know what might actually trigger something within you to actually really go, you know what, I actually really like doing that. Things like being an ambassador, like sort of helping out on open days. You never know when you might be sort of explaining your research to someone. You might say, okay, well, actually explaining it and taking it from that kind of PhD level to kind of talking to general public or even kind of school children. You might suddenly go, I actually really enjoy this kind of explanation kind of thing. And that was how I got into communications and marketing, was I actually just really liked writing up. I actually really liked writing my thesis. Very strange, I know. I don't think anyone else would have said that, but I actually really liked writing stuff down. I loved writing and summarising stuff. So that kind of departmental publicist role was perfect for me, because I just liked to talk to people, find out what they were doing and kind of write it down for other people to read. I always just really loved doing that. And it was just an opportunity that kind of came up and you just said, yeah, I'll do that, I'll get involved. There's always going to be some things in your universities that would be available to you, whether it is helping out through open days, like internships for students, or supervising, mentoring. So it really is all about saying yes. I can see you've also got demonstrator on there as well in undergraduate labs. Not necessarily talking PhD to kind of school children, but also PhD to like undergrad level. It is just about finding those opportunities, because they are out there within the universities themselves.
Yeah, I would like to add to that, like, I 100% support say yes to opportunities, but also to be mindful of your piece as well, as in, you don't have to say yes to everything necessarily, and at least I've learned that in a way the hard way, that saying yes to too many things also spreads you too thin sometimes. So while absolutely be open to opportunities, do those things that kind of scare you and say yes to them, but also be mindful that there are a lot of opportunities out there. And while I don't think any of the things I did within my PhD I ever did deliberately with a projection on my career, I did them at the time because I said yes to these things and no to those things, because the things I said yes to me inspired something, seemed fun, seemed interesting. They seemed to have value for me at the time that wasn't necessarily deliberately career focused, but just I needed something else that felt a bit more creative or gave me knowledge from a different perspective than what I was in. So again, I support the message of yes, but I would also say with a bit of nuance, again, you don't have to do everything.
I fully support what the rest of the panel have said about taking opportunity. I think just to summarise, and really like PhD, those 3-4 years is a really precious time. Like it's only that period of your life where you'll be afforded a bit of time to really indulge in research, and with quite a bit of time on the side to take up other these opportunities, especially within institutes like universities. So really make the most of it, because when you do get to work, there's less of that creative time. So really make it work for you if you can. So
just to build on that, when you get sort of into a work and a sort of a job, you have less of that sort of flexible freedom or time to think. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your day-to-day jobs in terms of what you actually do? Kyle, do you spend all day reading dry documents, or what do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most people see a patent and it's quite like a dull document. I'm not going to sort of try and sort of lie. I'm just going to be honest. But to be honest, the job role itself is just so much more exciting than that. So, if you think about the sort of life cycle of a patent, you start off with sort of invention disclosure. So you're meeting with the inventors, they're telling you about what they've come up with. And it's always a two-way conversation as well. So you're trying to tell them, they're telling you exactly what they've invented, in a sense, like either a product or a very sort of narrow concept. And then you're trying to communicate to them now, actually, in view of what else is in there, trying to understand what the broader field looks like. You're trying to tell them, no, your invention is much broader than that. You're trying to help them understand that, they're actually sort of, what they've got is just so much more valuable than they think. And you're not trying to protect a product, you're trying to protect an inventive concept. And then sort of that developed into sort of drafting the patent, sort of claiming the invention, which is usually the difficult part and the sort of very valuable part. And then you prosecute patents. So you file them at the UK IPO or the EPO, or other foreign patent offices, and then you sort of enter into a sort of a battle with the examiners. So at the UK IPO or the EPO, or the patent offices, and then they're trying to tell you, no, it's not patentable for X, Y, and Z, and you're trying to say, no, it is patentable. And then during that process, sort of it's very iterative. You sort of end up narrowing down your claim scope, so you have distinguished what the inventors have done over what else is sort of in the broader field. And then beyond that, you've also got, once you've got a patent granted, they can then get opposed. So companies obviously don't like patents, especially if they're not theirs, because it stops them operating and doing what they want to do. So often there'll be big oppositions filed where they're trying to say, actually, that isn't patentable. The UK examiner didn't get it, didn't have the full picture. This is loads of extra documents, loads of extra things that sort of destroy the novelty or inventive step of the invention. And then beyond that as well is also freedom to operate. So clients will often come to you and say, we've got this product that we want to commercialize, we want to bring to market, but we're aware of sort of patent X, Y, and Z. Sort of, are we allowed to do what we can do? Sort of, can we bring this product to market? Or do we need license agreements from sort of the owners of these patents and stuff? So it is quite broad, and there is a lot of sort of communication with the inventors and the examiners and then opposition stuff. So it's not just spending all day every day looking at a really dry document and sort of it's not like that at all. So does that help? Does that sell it, or
Yeah.
do I need to?
Some days you get to come out.
I actually heard from a friend of mine who's also training for a patent attorney. She loves the arguing part of it because they basically will tell you, no, this isn't innovative, and you can go, yes, it is, and like the whole debate about it, and like being very pedantic about the wording. That she loves that stuff.
Yeah,
I
no,
couldn't do it.
I mean, by nature, like all of us are so like, if we're passionate enough about something, you're very argumentative about it, right? Because you've got a viewpoint, and you become sort of very passionate about the patent that you've drafted, which obviously ultimately you're doing it with the interests of the client in mind, but also, you know, you've spent a lot of time on this, and I don't know, just it almost does feel personal in a sense. So it's actually really enjoyable in a professional manner to sort of push back. So
There's a job where you're allowed to argue. I like it. Anything anyone wants to add in their day-to-day jobs that you might not have covered?
Well, I guess with my day-to-day job, I kind of made a very deliberate decision that I wanted to go back to the creative space and the tinkering and the play in a way. As Chief Technology Officer, it was very strategic focus, trying to keep bigger picture in mind, managing other people, trying to manage a team and letting them develop innovations and just oversee the R&D. And I guess I felt that I didn't get much. I needed to find a way to carve out time for me to be able to do some of that development myself again. And that being said, I know there are people within a CTO or a CSO position who are able to carve out that time within that role. You don't necessarily need to go into a different role for that. You can also do that in the senior leadership team. I just felt for me that wasn't quite working, and where we were as a business that didn't quite fit. And so then now on my day-to-day basis, I've made that time again, which is something indeed very precious when you have your PhD, that you have a level of freedom and creativity. And if you want to go on it also all depends on your supervisor and your research group and what you do, but there is a certain freedom of like, oh, you know what, I want to go do this science outreach thing, I'm going to go do it. I want to explore this and this. At least I had a lot of freedom in my PhD, and that was wonderful. And I guess within my current role, I've tried to implement elements and find that again, because it is really, and I'm so grateful for the company that I work for, that I'm able to do that, and that I'm able to generate business value through it, because it is very, very rare to find that creative freedom and that space to develop. And then the other part of my job is very much overseeing several business units, implementing technologies and technology improvements, which comes with a lot of, not necessarily boring paperwork, but it's a lot of Excels. And also just a lot of working with other people and trying to, and this is where a lot of the stuff that I did in my PhD that was outside of my PhDs helped me so much in being a better team player and being better at understanding people and what drives them and making them deliver, which is really critical. And I would not have been able to do what I do now if it wasn't for already, organizing events during my PhD and like being parts of teams there. That was really important for me to be able to have those conversations now with people. And for instance, one of the hardest things I find is performance management. When you're working with people and you literally have to oversee performance of them, and I still struggle with that. But it is really, really critical. And especially coming from a technical background, I'm a very technical person. I am a people person, but it takes a different level of people person almost. And you want to develop those transferable skills to do that, because in the end, you can't just be just technical.
Yeah, really good point. And I like the fact you pointed out something that was hard as well. Anything you want to add, Joe? Do you get out and about, deadlines hitting all the time?
I said this in the intro, like no 2 days are the same with comms. What you're doing on one day might be writing, editing articles, next day developing website content and uploading stuff to the website, and then everything from kind of events management all the way through to kind of social media, etc. So just to kind of say a couple of things that we've done in the past, I'll say a year, we've launched new websites, we've developed conferences and big like webinars and agendas, developed kind of like brochures and things to kind of communicate different bits of cancer research. and then done things like engaging with kind of policymakers through various different ways, whether that's kind of like targeted communications about like, this is what we're doing in this area, this is what policy changes we need to make. It varies so much, but it really does, it relies on you actually having those skills that you develop during a PhD, I think, slash you've developed through your kind of your career. It needs that kind of attention to detail in some ways. It needs that creativity, that creative flair. There's so many different kind of ways to approach things, because what I'm good at isn't necessarily what one of my team members is good at, but they're better in some other ways that I'm not. So, for instance, one of my former colleagues was absolutely incredibly extroverted. She was like, she could literally talk to anyone in the room like she was your best mate. And I'm just like, how did you do that? How do you kind of just talk to someone immediately? Which meant she was a fantastic podcast host. So we launched a podcast with her. So it's leveraging expertise and your own kind of personality type to actually kind of go, okay, well, that's what you're good at. Let's see if we can use that within this kind of framework to see what we can deliver together. And it's things like that that you might not necessarily think of, that's kind of almost like a secondary skill or like kind of a personality trait that really make you advantageous for kind of future career. So it's things like that I'd also encourage people to think of. But so it's day to day, it's so variable that, writing, editing, project management, project kind of organization, people management, handling academics who don't reply to emails. Please reply to emails. If there are any academics in here. Slash PhD students as well. They're equally bad. No, it really isn't. But then we also have people that kind of say, we didn't know about this thing. Why didn't you tell us? And it's like, yeah, we did. We've emailed you 5 times. We've put it on notice boards. We've given you flyers. We've put flyers outside your office. How else do you want us to phone you up as well?
Yeah, all right. I get it.
Sorry. I shouldn't write. But no, it's so variable. It really is.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, good. Is there anything you want to add?
To add, yeah, just sort of quickly, I already mentioned in startup land, you wear many hats. So I won't go into all the various hats and jobs I do, but primarily my role is business development. So that is engaging with, finding customers and engaging with them and then working with them, building relationships and hopefully getting to contracts and running projects. So I'd never done that at all before starting up a startup. And I think initially when we set up Imperagen, I was sort of general dog's body, I think, aside of the 2 technical leads, the 2 Andys. And I didn't really anticipate I'd end up doing the commercial side of things. I was a little bit apprehensive. I was very apprehensive, to be honest. And in the early days, it's more about just setting things up and getting the technology, less about the commercial stuff. But unsurprisingly, when you set up a company, eventually you do have to make some money and you have to go out and find customers. So it sort of, for the better or worse, fell into my responsibility. So again, no real training program for this. It's pretty much kind of learning on the job, but like speaking to people like who've done this kind of thing before, because it is pretty much sales, right? And not something that I'd ever thought I would be comfortable in doing, coming from academia land. But having said that, you don't have to be a cheesy salesman. In fact, most people out there, most people in the room, you don't like cheesy salesmen, right? So when I'm working with partners and organizations, I'm talking to scientists as well, right? So it's very much about putting yourself in their shoes, understanding what their enzyme problems are. So all that knowledge from my PhD and postdoc comes forward. Like, I have to have that scientific knowledge, has to be very broad. I can't be an expert in every enzyme or every chemistry. So there's a lot of kind of thinking on my feet as well. But also, I'm not on my own. I can pull in Andy and the technical team to answer some questions that I might not be able to field. So it's very much a team sport as well. It's not just me on my own travelling around. But so it's been fun. I've developed a lot, in terms of confidence, in terms of learning how to, engage and build relationships with customers. There's lots of travel. there's a lot of people saying no or just not replying to emails. So for every 99 no's, there's one yes, and you just have to build that kind of resilience and that persistence, and eventually the rewards do come, and you have to make the most of the successes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm going to open up for questions. I promised it'd be dynamic. So who's got a burning question that they want to ask? Jacob.
So I think you kind of alluded this to a little bit. What's the most rewarding moment you've had in your career?
Good question. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, today.
I wasn't going to say that. This is probably a weird one and maybe not rewarding, but I remember one day, like, I'm not going to say that comms and marketing is always fantastic every single day of the week. It really isn't sometimes. I remember I was having a particularly bad day, and my end of day 3 p.m. meeting was actually with one of our new academics. I can't actually say what she was working on because it's actually going through the patent office at the moment. But she was talking to us about her research, and like she has a really fascinating personal like history of how she got here. We were just talking about her research and what she was doing, and it was just so inspiring. And so the actual most rewarding thing for me is actually just the ability to talk to scientists about the stuff that they're doing. Like my PhD, I ended my research career, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll just help you talk about your stuff now. And the most rewarding thing for me is pretty much every day when I can talk to an academic and understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. And for me, all about cancer research, it's all about those kind of new treatments, new innovations that are kind of helping people with cancer. And that is fantastic to just kind of be part of that and help them get their research out there. So easy answer for me is it's all about kind of the academics and their research.
Anybody else got a highlight?
I'm still kind of thinking it through. It's a big question. But for me, in terms of most rewarding, there's a few elements. One is, once in a while, I just get hit with how much the company I'm in has grown in such a short time, and what we're achieving is phenomenal. And that in itself is just really rewarding. Sometimes we recently had like a company-wide day, or like whenever we have like a culture day or a social, and I just look at the team we suddenly have. Like when I joined, I was employee number 10. Now we're over 50. And just sitting in that room, looking around and being like, heck, in such a short time. Now we're here, and sometimes I stand in our, so basically the company spun out from lab technology, we build a pilot, we build a production facility, and so sometimes I stand in the production hall and I'm just looking at it and I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. So that is one element where I'm just like, that is incredibly rewarding to see. Secondly, more individual, when I changed roles, going from CTO back to engineer and being back in the lab, the first new product I'd made, and I literally was in the lab and I had this little pot and I was like, oh, I made this. And I was like surprisingly emotional about it because I haven't been able to do that for such a long time. Probably also didn't help that I was very, very pregnant. So I was like very much like, oh my God, I made this, my baby. It's like, oh no, I've got other things going on. But that to me was also just very rewarding, to having something physically created with my hands myself, and yeah, that was just for me very valuable.
Excellent. I can see the panel looking at me, so we'll take any other questions.
Can I ask?
Oh yeah, go on, Natalie.
So more than half of the doctoral students' EPSRC fund will end up outside academia.
Yeah.
We know that's a vast number, and that's fantastic. But sometimes we hear that supervisors and other people will say to people with PhDs, really, it's best to sort of try and keep going in academia. Really, you want to be an academic, don't you? And sometimes can not belittle, but say a career outside academia just isn't the same. How have you responded with your own arguments about how great and successful you can be outside academia?
I think it's probably my turn. It's a good question. I don't know if there's a simple answer to that, but I think with PhD students and postdocs in the room, I think you all need to just be really mindful of yourselves and what you want to do. I mean, Aline mentioned, don't take no for an answer. Your PI, your professor, they're not, he or she, they're not God, right? They don't have all the answers. They are, academics. You've got your own path, right? So it's really up to you. If you want to stay in academia, then there's a specific route to that, whatever they say, and there are clearly lots of alternatives out there that your professor or PI presumably has not worked in or ever, touched on in their careers. And they're also, they've got their own careers and own challenges themselves, so they are thinking about their own careers too. You have to be mindful of that. You have to be mindful of your career path and what you want to do. So,
yeah, just to add on to that as well, I don't think there's anything, I did, when Aline obviously jumped in earlier to sort of defend academia, I definitely felt like, oh no, is this coming across as an anti-academia sort of pitch in a sense? And I don't think it, for me, it isn't. Some of my best sort of experiences have been during my PhD and my postdoc, and I would definitely if you've got the opportunity to do a postdoc and you're interested in it, I wouldn't worry too much about what your sort of end destination is going to look like. And it's only a 3-year contract. So just sort of do what you want to do, because there's so many opportunities available to you having such a technical background that I don't think a lot of jobs are ever closed off to you just because you spend an extended amount of time in academia. So, and if anything, it just helps to develop those skills that you can then translate. So I'm training obviously as a patent attorney now. I'm 32 in literally a week. So I'm already a little bit old, but then there's other trainees in the firm that are older than me as well, 35, for example. So they've all had, extended sort of, I realise that's maybe not that old for a lot of people, but what I mean is since their PhDs, which they completed sort of similar to me back in their early 20s, they've taken a good 10 years out and just sort of explored other things until they've eventually come around to sort of training from step one. Do you know what I mean? We essentially are sort of relearning something at a very basic level and teaching ourselves sort of intellectual property law. And it is a whole career start, you're starting your career mid-30s, that's fine. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with staying in academia for longer periods of time. If that's what people want to do, I don't think it closes things off for you.
No, and I think as well, what is just really important to keep in mind is, as you said, you can just go try things out and change. You don't know whether you like something until you do it. Give it a few years, maybe you realize, or even a few months. And you can switch it up. You can go out of academia, and guess what? There are also plenty of stories of very successful academics who worked in industry for a while and then came back to academia, and who've actually, because of that experience, brought a lot of value into academia that, a lot more industry understanding, for instance, or there is flexibility like that. You're not stuck. Don't ever pigeonhole yourself, because as you say, sometimes people will be like, oh, but stay in academia. And also you hear this, I heard this, that people said, oh, but people don't want to necessarily hire PhDs because you're too technical, you're too much of a specialist. That's also not true. When people say, oh, but you have no industry experience, you've come straight out of your PhD, I'm like, sorry, you've just done 4 years of research all by yourselves. You've been working as a researcher. You have worked. You've not just been to school and that's it. So it's very important to not pigeonhole yourself and to not let others do that to you either. There is flexibility.
I was maybe lucky my supervisor never said that to me. But then I think that was because I said to them maybe in end of second year that I was I'm getting out of research. I just want to finish my PhD and then kind of move on, which is why I did all my comms and marketing stuff. But yeah, I really think it just depends on what your interests are in. Everyone is individual, and kind of the one of the things about kind of Notch, the life science marketing agency that I worked at, there was actually probably about 20 of us by the time I left. maybe about half of them had PhDs, the other half kind of didn't. Of those 20 people, actually only 2 of them had marketing degrees. The rest were all scientists that were kind of taught marketing on the job, and I feel like you could kind of extrapolate this sentence to other fields as well, where it's easier to teach a scientist marketing than it is to teach a marketer science. And that's ultimately kind of what I would probably say is true in this instance. It's much easier to kind of just pick up those secondary skills in other areas and other fields to gain skills and expertise kind of in kind of non-scientific areas, let's say. So would never say it kind of closes off anything. At the end of the day, it's a degree. It's a bit of education, it's a bit of research, it's a bit of a job, it's a bit of everything, doing a PhD. So it doesn't close doors. If anything, it just kind of helps open more. And while I realise we've all got kind of career paths as kind of a linear time, your career doesn't need to be linear, and it doesn't need to be, I went from A to B to C and I'm perfectly happy with that. It could go A to D to there to there to there. You could move, jump jobs, change careers. World's open to you, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there. We have time for one last question, if anyone's got one. If not, I'll just ask one just to think about as sort of we close out. I'll start with you, Kyle. Just what one piece of advice have you got for people in the room that are either mid PhD, I know you're post-masters, postdoc, or thinking about trying something different. What's the one piece of advice you've got as you go and search for a job, a career, or next steps?
Yeah, I mean, if we're thinking specifically to do with if anybody here is interested in patent law, which I mean, hopefully they are, or might consider it in the future, is there's a lot of firms offer like taster days and sort of summer schools in a sense, which aren't very intensive. And so if you go onto like IP careers, you can often find them sort of advertised there. And they will offer you sort of a couple-day taster sessions of what the job's actually like. So this will stem to other job sort of career choices as well, but especially for IP law. And then you can sort of go in and get an experience of what the job feels like. Obviously that looks great when you actually come to apply for the actual job, but it also gives you an immediate sort of, take a week out of your PhD, do one of these taster sessions. Do you like the job? You know what I mean? That'll sort of help inform, is this something I want to start thinking about in more detail and sort of preparing my CV towards? Or you can just sort of rule it out completely and just think, IP law is not for me. I've tried a taster session. It's no good. And so that's definitely, I think, is like a really sort of key thing to consider, is just get some early exposure.
Yeah, and use your networks to find a placement, because one of my PhD students now is on a 2-month placement with the Tech Transfer Office, and she got her elbows out, and I wouldn't say harassed, that's too strong a word, but she travels on the train with someone who works in the Tech Transfer Office and saw them every day, and asked them several times and got it. So she's getting experience. Yeah,
and I actually know the person you're talking about, because when they go to the Tech Transfer Office, they obviously say, oh, I'm interested in patents and stuff. And then they then often refer them to, oh, I know such and such who's a sort of a trainee patent attorney. You should speak to them to see what the job's like. And that's another aspect, is like I'm contacted on LinkedIn, like I would say quite regularly, by just people that are sort of interested and want to find out more. And I think that's it's a numbers game. Not everyone will want to take the time to get back to you. And if you're inundated by people saying, I want to be a trainee patent attorney, what's it like? You can't reply to everybody. It'd be a full-time job, but definitely reach out to people on LinkedIn and just sort of say I see that you're doing the job that I want to do. Any advice? What's it actually like? And sort of things like that. And I think that's really useful. I certainly have helped sort of a handful of people this last year just sort of get more of a flavour of the job and sort of help prepare them for this sort of rigorous interview process and stuff.
So that sounds like an excellent opportunity for anyone who's thinking about it.
Yeah.
Very quick question, and then we'll come to the.
It's directed to, actually, sorry, my voice is back. So inside, probably when you want to get a job, maybe looking for a job in the industrial setting, let's say you maybe have a PhD, because most likely they view people who do PhD as researchers, right? So now my question is, as a biotech, I just did my master's, I've not done my PhD yet. So if you're trying to break it into the biotech industry, they tell me, why don't you just proceed and do your master's, right? So you are saying here, they view you as someone who is a researcher. Like I am here trying to get in there, I've got some industrial experience, don't know in biotech, but I'm being advised to go ahead and do my PhD. So how do we balance this out?
So is the question PhD or not PhD?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it might be slightly biased, but you've done recruitment, Vicky.
Yeah. Well, a PhD is a degree that opens up certain doors to you. That is true. Like certain positions won't necessarily be available without a PhD that easily. Sometimes they are by additional experience, but you definitely don't need a PhD to go far within biotech. And for instance, I've got a colleague of mine, I swear he's one of the most clever people ever. He's one of our best scientists by far. He didn't do a PhD. He's got a lot of experience and he's just really good at what he does. I'd say go to a PhD if you see there is a topic that really interests you and you want to delve into it for 3-4 years and you want to be obsessed with it, or do a PhD because it's a great opportunity to figure out what you want to do. That was kind of why I did a PhD. I wasn't really sure, but hey, that topic was interesting. It was abroad and I wanted to move somewhere else. It seemed like a fun research group. Why not? So I wouldn't say do a PhD, at least that's my view, on what are the career opportunities it's going to open up for me, because there's multiple ways to open up to get to different places. You can get there doing a master's, doing a PhD, just building up experience. Do a PhD because you want to do that research or you want to do that research group or be in a university for a while. That would be my advice. I hope that helps.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
100% agree. Within cancer research, there's loads of our researchers that don't have PhDs, that are kind of integral members of kind of different research teams. They publish papers, they do everything else a kind of PhD student or a kind of postdoc or anyone else would. They just kind of, it's more of a dabbling on the side of their full-time job, which is normally like a technician or something like that. But 100%, like if you're going to do a PhD, be passionate about the research first of all, and that's kind of the reason really to get involved, because we have this at our recruitment fairs all the time of people asking like, do I need to do a PhD to get into this career, and more often than not we say do a PhD if you really want to do it, or if you want to become like a clinical academic, but that's kind of a whole separate skew really.
Brilliant, thank you.
I should also add as well, one of my partners as well, that obviously my supervising partners, she's not got a PhD, but she's absolutely brilliant. She's a partner in the firm. So, you know, a PhD is not a requirement to become a patent lawyer. So, yeah.
Good point. Any last pieces of advice for everybody?
Do you want to go first?
Well, I was actually thinking about that one on the drive over here, so I'm like, yes, I've got an answer to that, although I found your advice was really good. But basically, my advice would be just career-wise. The classic thing you hear is get out of your comfort zone. Yes, 100% agree with that. Get out of your comfort zone. Do what scares you. However, that does not mean you need to be uncomfortable all the flipping time. And I guess I kind of learned that the hard way, sticking with something too long that I didn't quite enjoy. Yeah. Yes, get out of your comfort zone. But again, be mindful of your peace as well.
That's really good advice. I'm taking notes behind the scene. Joe?
For comms and marketing, I'll speak for my own comms and marketing team. Reach out to us. Just come and have a chat with us. There's going to be comms and marketing people within any university. Go and talk to them. There will be projects that you could get involved in, whether that's something as simple as kind of like within your research group, there's a new paper. Could you write it up into like kind of a lay summary, let's say, or do something to get him to contribute to like kind of a piece of collateral or something. So if you want to get into comms and marketing, experience is really useful for those kind of like job adverts and all that kind of stuff. So just reach out to us, because speaking from my team, we have loads of ideas. We actually have not enough hands on deck to actually do them. So there's always stuff that we can use additional kind of help with, whether that is writing something up, editing certain documents, etc. If you have money as well, that is very advantageous. We've hosted a couple of interns, both unpaid and paid. And so there may be other kind of funded opportunities as well through different avenues. But just reach out to people and make those connections, whether that is via LinkedIn, via like sort of any other member of kind of PS within your university. They will know or should know who to contact within comms and marketing. Or if you have those connections yourself, if there is anyone here from Manchester, I can help a little bit, or Enna can help. I'm afraid I don't know if there's any other comms people in the room. So yeah, just reach out and have that chat.
Mm-hmm. From sort of startup enterprise perspective, if that's something you wanted to look into, maybe you've got a burning idea from your PhD or your postdoc, and you were wondering about what would that look like if I ever carried it forward into spinning out a company. There are plenty of accelerator programs you can do as a PhD student, as a postdoc. I mean, iCure is, you run a program affiliated with IBIC, so that's basically a short sort of accelerator program, basically gives a postdoc or PhD researcher possibly just a bit of time and money and a bit of training to explore how to commercialise your idea. And it's precisely what we did at the start of Imperagen, so super useful. But, you know, you can just test the idea out. You don't have to commit to fully founding a company if you decide it's not for you. So while you're still within university, it affords you a great level of flexibility to test these things out without having to sort of fully commit, and you'll learn a lot along the way, even if you decide not to take that pill like we did.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just before we thank the panel, I think my reflections from what you were saying, I think it's don't take no as an answer. Lean in, say yes to opportunities, but don't say yes all the time. So balance between your yeses and nos. I think get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, but know your limits and don't spend all your time feeling uncomfortable. And I think the last point was you've all talked about talking to people, reaching out, using that skill in your day jobs, whether it be sales, disclosures, working in a team, talking and getting new articles, but also throughout your sort of studies, it was leaning into new opportunities, volunteering, experience, placements, talking to others, accelerator programs. And I think as researchers in HE sector, you have a huge amount of flexibility in terms of your time and ability to do little bits on the side. I think really take advantage of that, lean in, find your niche, find your opportunities, and there are always little pots of funding around that you can tap into more than you probably are aware. So build your network, build your connections, always ask. The worst they can say is no, and use IBIC network to do that. And if you can't find something and you want a specific area, come and talk to us, come and talk to the IBIC team. We can hopefully help you and put you in touch. Last thing, if there's opportunities, training opportunities, career opportunities, placements that you're thinking about, please come and talk to us, give us some suggestions, because we want to do things that are useful for our community. So please, as a challenge, come and email ibic@manchester.ac.uk. Talk to the team on the way out. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for the panel. Really insightful discussions. I've been taking lots of notes, and I see other people have too. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for staying. Safe travels home, and see you again at a future event very soon. Thanks everyone.